What if I told you that a single river has determined the fate of 3 continents? The Nile connects 11 countries, shapes political alliances, and continues to fuel international conflicts today. In this documentary, we'll travel from the highlands of Ethiopia to the Mediterranean Sea, exploring the river's hidden influence on history and modern politics. You'll meet farmers whose harvests depend on ancient water rights, engineers building controversial dams, and diplomats negotiating the future of nations. The story of civilization itself cannot be told without understanding how this one geographical feature changed everything, and what its contested waters mean for millions of lives hanging in the balance. The river that flows backwards. Most rivers in the world follow a fairly predictable pattern, flowing from higher elevations to lower ones, typically moving south to north in the northern hemisphere and north to south in the southern hemisphere. The Nile, however, breaks this convention entirely. It flows northward for nearly 4,160 miles from its sources in Central Africa to its delta on the Mediterranean Sea, making it the longest river in Africa and the entire world. This geographical anomaly creates a stark contrast visible even from space. The river appears as a vibrant green ribbon slicing through the golden sands of the Sahara Desert, a vivid illustration of its life-giving properties in an otherwise hostile environment. The northward flow of the Nile results from the region's unique topography. The river begins in the highlands of East Africa, where Lake Victoria contributes to the White Nile, and the Blue Nile begins in the Ethiopian highlands. From these elevated sources, the waters naturally flow toward the lowest point they can reach, the Mediterranean Sea. This direction has profound implications for the people and ecosystems along its banks. For Mohammed Hashim, a 54-year-old farmer in the village of El Mansoura in Egypt's Fertile Delta region, the Nile's unusual flow is more than a geographical curiosity. It's the foundation of his family's existence for 7 generations. Well before dawn each morning, Mohammed walks barefoot through a small field of sugarcane, feeling the cool mud between his toes just as his ancestors did thousands of years ago. His calloused hands deftly adjust the same type of irrigation channels that ancient Egyptians carved through their fields. My grandfather's grandfather taught his son, who taught his son, who taught me, Mohammed explains, gesturing to the carefully maintained network of canals that bring the Nile's waters to his crops. The river gives and we receive. This has never changed. Mohammed's daily routine mirrors practices that would be recognizable to farmers from pharaonic times. He still uses a wooden tool similar to the ancient Egyptian shaduf to lift water from the canal to higher ground. Though modern pumps are available, Mohammed maintains that his traditional methods waste less water and keep him connected to the practices of his forebears. The importance of this connection becomes clear when we examine the environments beyond the river's reach. Less than a mile from Mohammed's lush fields, the land transforms into barren desert where almost nothing grows. The boundary between fertile soil and desert is so abrupt that Egyptians have long referred to their country as the Black Land and the Red Land, the black soil of the floodplain and the red-tinged sands of the desert. This stark division has shaped Egyptian civilization from its earliest days. The narrow strip of arable land along the Nile comprises only about 5% of Egypt's total area, but supports over 95% of its population. In essence, Egypt is the Nile, and the Nile is Egypt. This concentration of human activity along a single waterway has few parallels anywhere else on Earth. The river's north-south orientation connects vastly different ecosystems and climate regions. It brings water from the rainy highlands of East Africa to the arid lowlands of Egypt, essentially transporting rainfall from one climate zone to another. This geographical feature made the river uniquely predictable in ancient times. Before modern dams altered its flow, the Nile would flood annually between June and September, when heavy rains fell in the Ethiopian highlands. These floods deposited rich silt on the floodplains, naturally fertilizing the soil and creating some of the most productive agricultural land in the ancient world. Mohammed points to a faded line on a stone wall near his home, a high water mark from before the Aswan High Dam was completed in 1970. My father said the water would come up to here every year, he says. They called it the gift of the Nile. Now the dam controls the water, but we still depend on what comes from the south. The predictability of these annual floods allowed ancient Egyptians to develop sophisticated agricultural techniques and freed portions of the population from food production, enabling the development of specialized trades, complex religious systems, and monumental architecture. It's no coincidence that one of history's earliest and most enduring civilizations arose along this river. The fertile banks of the Nile stand in such stark contrast to the surrounding desert that the ancient Greek historian Herodotus famously described Egypt as the gift of the Nile. This observation remains as true today as it was 2,500 years ago. Without the river bringing water from the heart of Africa, the magnificent civilization of ancient Egypt could never have developed, and millions of people like Mohammed would not be able to survive in the region today. This geographical exception connects approximately 300 million people across 11 countries, from Tanzania and Burundi in the south to Egypt in the north. The river serves as a crucial source of water for drinking, agriculture, and increasingly hydroelectric power. Despite political boundaries and cultural differences, these millions of people share a common dependence on this single water system. Yet this life-giving resource faces increasing threats. Climate change, population growth, and upstream dam projects are altering the Nile's flow patterns and creating tension between nations that share its waters. Every year, I notice the water in my canals is a little less, Mohammed says, showing how he's had to extend his irrigation channels further toward the main branch of the river. My father never worried about having enough water. Now I worry every season. These observations reflect larger challenges facing the entire Nile basin. Ethiopia's construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile, which contributes about 85% of the water that eventually reaches Egypt, has created tensions. While Ethiopia sees the dam as essential for its development, countries downstream fear reduced water supply. Despite these challenges, the Nile continues to sustain life along its banks, just as it has for millennia. As the sun rises over Mohammed's fields, the first rays illuminate a patchwork of green crops stretching toward the horizon, bordered by the sharp edge of the desert, a visible boundary between fertility and barrenness that encapsulates the critical role this northward flowing river has played in human history. The Highland Springs,